Okay then. Welcome to the final day of the 2020 summer series. My name is Ali Aruji from Team 5199, the Robot Dolphins from Outer Space, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. Thanks for tuning in so far. Throughout the past week, the summer series has featured top teams from Southern California in a variety of workshop topics. If you have happened to miss any of these past workshops and are interested in tuning in on them, the recordings will be available on the Robot Dolphins YouTube channel shortly. Today is our final day. We will be discussing the ins and outs of recruiting members and growing a team in this workshop session. Afterwards, at 5:45, two of the team leads on Team 5199 will be going over how to create an effective robotics curriculum, so make sure you stay tuned in for that. We're welcomed by panelists from Team 3309, the Firebots, Team 1622, Spider, and Team 2485, Warlords. Now I'm going to give a chance to each of the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Ramanan Nguyen. I'm the Chief Products Officer on Team Spider and also one of this year's Dean's List winners. And I'm joined by our team treasurer, Mei He.
Hello, I'm Luca Bonanno. I am the Business and Outreach Department Head for Team 2485, the Warlords, and I am joined by Chisato, who is our Director of Awards.
And I'm Adrian Machado from Team 3309, and I'm the Vice President of Business there.
Throughout the workshops, if you have any, the panel, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section of the YouTube, and I'll be sure to get around to it. As for now, I'll start off by asking, what has been the best tactic for your team to recruit new members from your prior experiences?
I guess we could go first. So I wouldn't say there's one specific thing that's really helped us grow the team. I think it's just a bunch of small things like just participating in school events like Club Rush, making sure that we're on the school website and just working with the school, and also mentoring a variety of younger robotics teams in our area, like First Tech Challenge and First Lego League teams at the middle schools who eventually filter into our school. And that really helps, I guess, gain a lot of interested students who also have some prior robotics experience.
For our team, we're affiliated with Francis Parker School, which runs from pre-K through 12th grade. So we have quite a large audience to spread our message to. We mostly market, obviously, to our middle school students who are coming up, promoting up into the upper school and will become eligible to join our team. But additionally, when we have new students coming to Parker for the first time, we appeal to them at clubs fair and through on-campus marketing. Additionally, like Madeline mentioned, we're involved in the robotics programs on our campus, both FLL in middle school, and we also, not necessarily directly affiliated with our school, but we also host 2 FTC teams on our campus.
Yeah, the most effective tactic for Team 3309, in my experience, has been the summer camp that we host for 6th to 8th graders. A lot of them attended in 6th grade, and then they like it, so they attended in 7th and 8th, and then they end up attending Servite and join the robotics team here. So they have a couple of years of experience, and they've been involved with the program. That's, in my experience, has been the most effective tactic for getting new members onto the team.
Do you guys have any long-term business plans to grow your team down the line? If you do, could you please run us through it real quick?
Something that Team Spider has been doing this last, I think, year and a half is trying to get a robotics team or program in every one of the schools in our school district. And the ways we've been doing that is by hosting informational nights at all the schools and help gain interest in First Lego League and First Tech Challenge, as well as we've been hosting a ton more competitions, of course, during COVID, but at our school, like First Tech Challenge qualifiers and First Lego League Junior Expos. So just in general, trying to increase the number of smaller robotics teams in our area.
For us, in terms of our own team, our we have 70 plus members every year. So we're not necessarily always looking for more quantity. I will say though, within our team, we're always trying to see how we can best incorporate new members in our team. So the past year or two, our software department has completely rewired their training program. Same with the strategy department, and really every department. We're always trying to analyze how we can best integrate our new members onto the team and keep recruiting new members that are willing to join and be passionate about it.
So on Team 3309, we're based out of Servite High School, which is a parochial school. And that means since we're not necessarily in a school district and we're not part of a K through 12 school, we don't actually have kind of, in a sense, a feeder school or program. Servite typically gets maybe 3 or 4 kids from a bunch of schools. So something that we did was we created what we've called a PR robot. And it's almost like a little robot that we've created. So every time that we go to a school to present, this is also partnered with our school's student ambassador program. So every time that they go out to a school to make a presentation, they'll bring this robot. And since it's much smaller and you don't have to bring a truck, bring all of the game pieces for it like an FRC robot, you're able to bring it to all of these smaller schools, which really kind of expands 3309's reach and FIRST's reach at the same time, which has been a really effective marketing tool for Team 3309. So keeping that going and kind of evolving that program, I think, will be really effective for Team 3309.
Yeah, that's a lot of great ideas from all of you. What advice do you have for smaller teams who are looking to develop their team further, not only in competitive aspects, but also in further impacting their communities? Because I know a lot of you have experience directly sponsoring teams and allowing them to kind of start up and grow. So what have you learned from your past experiences on that?
I would say mostly just hosting a lot of outreach events. As everyone has said, I think it's really important that you kind of market your team to the feeder schools, because those are the main schools that are going to your high school. So it's mainly going to be those kids. But I think just kind of hosting these kind of events also gets you out to other places, because I know that we've had kids from schools that are not necessarily our feeder schools join our team because they've heard of us. So just kind of marketing your team and getting it out there is my biggest advice.
I'd like to kind of add on to what she just said there. I'd say getting your name out there is definitely the number one thing for growing a small team. As a team that's been pretty large for my entire time on it, but I've heard a lot about how we grew, and honestly, making sure that you have a group of kids who are very committed to the team, kind of almost like the team elders, and having them be passionate not only about the team now, but the team in the future. And really embracing a recruiting method that is successful and creating a training program that allows new students to feel welcome and feel like they have a place on the team when they join.
Yep. Again, like all of them said, getting your name out there is number one. In my experience, getting out to schools is most effective, because say that you reach your target audience of 6th to 8th graders who are going to be the people immediately incoming to high school. Those 6th and 8th graders, especially at these smaller schools and at most schools in general, those parents are also going to be talking with other parents who might be parents who are in 5th, 4th, 3rd grade. So say they have a son or a daughter who's interested in robotics. Then by word of mouth, your team gets spread to those parents, and now they have you in mind when they're thinking of a robotics team to look at for their son or daughter to explore. So getting your name out there and going to outreach events and going to schools is most effective, not just from the people you impact, but from them talking to others.
Kind of flipping it up a bit, what advice do you have for attracting mentors to your team? And like, how does your team bring in local mentors to help build a strong mentorship program?
So we really value our mentors, and some of the ways that in the past that we've been able to get more mentors is, just asking parents who may work for engineering companies, even not engineering companies, actually lead business mentors and optometrists, so nothing to do with engineering, but just asking parents who are interested in the team if they want to help support the team more. We've also had some mentors bringing their coworkers, and we kind of have days where we have almost like an open house for mentors, and just in general, just treating our mentors super well and hope they stay.
Yeah, just going along with what Madeline said, our team has been really fortunate to have a pretty large group of parent mentors who have been willing to join and be really involved in our team. So parent mentors are make up a lot of our mentor base. Additionally, sometimes we have when we have new sponsorships. They'll bring in like a new mentor, which is always really nice. And then additionally, sometimes we also have alumni that come back and decide to mentor.
Asking parents, as they all said, parent mentors are really effective because they're kind of doubly invested in the team because their son or daughter's probably on it. So they really want to help out. And it's a way for them to spend time kind of with their family, so it's a double win for them. But asking sponsors and doing events with your sponsors is really beneficial because not only does it kind of better the relationship, but it also gives you exposure to kind of your target audience for mentors, because that's all of the people you're looking to reach out for, whether it's for business, marketing, engineering. You're at these workplaces kind of selling your team and asking for help. And a lot of the time, the people who are looking to be mentors are always looking to give back. And they're really excited to see an opportunity for them to not only educate, but give back to their community. And then again, just treating your mentors really well because, I mean, they teach us a lot of what we know and we couldn't really have FIRST without them.
I have a question coming in from Stefan Hardines. Do you have to do anything to restrict your membership opposed to growth? Is there any kind of membership filter that you have to go through?
For the most part, to join our team, we try to keep it as open as possible. A lot of the times, if people are interested but not entirely there, we let them come into our facility to see to kind of get a taste of what it's like to be on Team Spider. Of course, if you're on the team, if you, act out or misbehave, there are going to be problems, or you're going to be reprimanded. But for the most part, we try to keep our recruitment as open as possible. And anyone who's basically interested in robotics, and you don't even have to necessarily be interested, you could be interested in the business aspect of things. We're basically willing to let them on.
For our team, we have a similar open join policy, as Parker has a no-cut policy in all of its clubs and activities. We do, though, institute, a training requirement would be the only, barrier to entry, ensuring that you have this many training hours and hours contributed to the team. But that's mostly in the fall season. But in terms of initially joining and saying that you're interested, we have no barriers.
Yeah, for joining Team 3309, again, there's pretty much no barriers. If you're interested and you willing to show up, then you're kind of in. We don't really have a barrier for anybody because even if you're not fully interested because you think robotics and then you start working on something and it doesn't really attract you, then you see someone working on, say, Adobe Illustrator, Premiere Pro over in the corner, and you're interested in art and you can go work on a different part of the team. That's still someone valuable who's working on the team. So having that no barrier and exposing them to everything is kind of really effective in the way that Team 3309 does it.
Another question coming from the comments is Rick Jung. When you plan presentations at other schools, who do you target as the initial contact? Do you present during a class, an assembly, or after school, or like how do you kind of have the output onto the different schools you go to?
Most of our outreach events to schools are like we're talking about like FLL teams and stuff. So we generally have them after school. And most of these events are student led. So we usually contact them through any connections we have with that school. So if it's like, we'll usually have students contact because they know someone who's like on PTA or maybe is a teacher at the school. So usually the students who lead them are like in contact with the school. So it depends.
We also go through a similar process. We try to have everything student-led as much as possible. A lot, if we're recruiting for our own team, it'll mainly be within our school campus. So sometimes we can integrate that throughout the day. However, if we're doing external outreach outside our school, then we'll also find students who have contacts. Maybe that's, their past school, their past elementary school, maybe Boy Scouts, any former contact that they have, we'll use to our advantage and try to get events from there.
The number one benefit to having kind of the PR robot, as I mentioned before, is that robotics, like, we don't have to go out and look for all of these connections on our own. We've integrated with the student ambassador program at Servite so that when they go out to make these class visits, we also get to go and show off Team 3309. So that's the way that we get to do it. And then as far as going to schools for other events, it's normally after school. We have a pre-existing connection there.
Sounds good. Next question coming in from Ryan Griggs. What structures or activities are in place in your team to ensure your new recruits are being engaged and growing into the people your team and community needs?
So something kind of unique about our team is we recently reformatted our leadership. So as our president, and we have 3 VPs, VP of Business, VP of PR, and VP of Robot, of course. And then by having 3 different VPs, they could kind of focus more on their specific, group or sub-team. So it really helps interact with the rookies a lot more. There's a lot more opportunity for them to work with the older members. And then we also have a part of the team, our SWE Next Club, or the Society of Women Engineers Club, specifically to help support girls who are interested in going into STEM and robotics.
So our team's training program includes what we call 101s and one-on-ones. 101s being small group-based classes led by our student leaders, and one-on-ones are individual classes led by our student leaders. And these programs are available in most of our departments, and they allow students to kind of take a self-guided path through training and becoming qualified and learn about the department or a field that they are most interested in personally, and allowing students to kind of choose their own path makes them more passionate about what they're learning about and more passionate about the team in general, and they kind of naturally fill those roles. And as well as what Madeline talked about, we have a women's program called WOW, which you may probably have heard of. Not only is it present in our team, we have chapters across the country and internationally. And it's a really great program that we've created to have women kind of embraced on our team and brought in to STEM in a way that many of these girls joining our team never thought would be possible.
For kind of the training program to make sure that all the team members contribute and are involved and engaged, Team 3309 has this culture where all of the mentors and the students kind of take it upon themselves to see that if someone's not working or sitting alone, that they always try to involve them, whether that's involving them in teaching them how to powder coat, showing them how to use the lathe, or just having them follow you around while you work on the robot or you work on piece of business or graphic design, just having that companionship makes them come back because it's more fun when you're doing it with your friends. And also, they're learning something because when you can be working on something, you're involving them and you're teaching them while you're doing it. So making sure that everyone's involved through a team culture makes it a lot easier because it's not just a training program. It's a constant environment where learning is encouraged.
Going back to our anchor questions for a little bit, I know 3309 already mentioned this in your demo robot, but for the rest of you, to what extent does your team utilize demonstrations of your robot at local schools for recruiting? Like, do you guys take your robot as well as the game pieces to the events, or do you just not take anything at all? And how does that work for you guys?
We usually take our past robots and we'll take like the essential game pieces that are like that the robot uses and can like make a demonstration with. When we bring the robot there, we have it like run around in the corner so that it can like show the kids what it does and interest them. But yeah, so that's pretty much it.
And then actually on top of that, for some of the international events that we host, like when we went down to Paraguay, we actually brought a bunch of mini robots and then we made a mini game for them to play with. And then I'm pretty sure in Paraguay we had like 2 different robots that we were able to allow kids to use and demo.
Yeah, we rarely do outreach events without bringing a robot or at least something moving. So we'll try to keep our past robot functioning at least at a bare minimum level, and we'll bring parts as if we have space for it. But I think the robot is, it's very visually appealing, and it's what initially draws people in. And then you learn more about FRC and your teams more specifically a little bit later on. So I do think that if you have a functioning robot, there's no reason not to bring it along.
I have a question coming in from Rick Jung again. Do you specifically reach out to coding classes to find people who can program? Or I think more generally, if there's an area that your team is lacking in for the upcoming season, do you have any processes for kind of like direct marketing at certain skill sets that are beneficial to your team?
So that's coincidental because this last year we kind of struggled with getting in some more programming members. But something that we kind of offered to our team is one of our mentors. He's very skilled in programming, and we kind of did offered a summer training program to help train anyone who's interested, even if they may not be already on programming, if they want to learn programming and kind of learn the ropes. So we offer that to our team as well as we outreach to some of the newer members to our school or like incoming freshmen if they're interested in really learning the ropes for programming and possibly becoming our new programming lead. So just kind of, I guess, putting out more opportunity for that specific sub-team, I would say, is probably your best choice.
For us, I don't think we necessarily recruit based on department specifically. Our recruiting is solely based around who comes to our school, either through the middle school or through a new admission. But as far as I know, I don't think we've ever really recruited for specific departments. We kind of allow students to choose what they want, and we've never had huge issues in not having enough students in one area or another. So, yeah.
Yeah, typically 3309, we just have anyone who wants to join the team and is on the team kind of find what they want to pursue. And then specifically for programming this past year, one of our mentors was actually kind enough to be doing programming presentations available to all the students who were interested. So that way, we're very fortunate to have mentors who are motivated to take it upon themselves to train the students. But that's probably the best way, in my opinion. Just having whoever has a natural passion for it and then encouraging that passion as much as possible.
We have a question coming in from Myra Garrett. How do you appeal the business aspect of FRC to new members?
I'm not sure if we have like a specific like thing that we do, but I know that I joined the business team because, well, partly because my friends were in it, but I think that we do this thing at the beginning of this before the season starts where we take all of the kids and we run them through all the different types of sub teams. So I think that's one way to kind of market for all of the sub teams, not just specifically business, because that way everyone gets a chance to see what each sub team does and then they can choose from there.
We mostly rely on word of mouth to just spread the message of what exactly business and outreach does, because I think we do more than people initially realize. And like she said, we also, when we market to our middle schoolers, our 8th graders in the spring before the summer season, we do have a slideshow prepared that takes them through every department of our team and gives them a brief overview so that they at least know a little bit about what they're walking into.
As far as specifically appealing business to people, I don't think we ever let me consider this. So on Team 3309, we, at the beginning of kind of every season, we have, as they were saying, kind of a session where all of our sub teams can explain what they do and kind of what they're about. The people who come to business, we typically never like recruit anyone. There's always someone out of the incoming class of new members who always kind of has an interest in it, whether it's marketing, public speaking, going on outreach. There's always someone who has an interest in some facet of business, so they'll always come up to us, and then we just kind of tell them about it and then involve them as soon as possible. I think outreach is one of the most effective ways to kind of loop someone into business, because outreach, in my opinion, is one of the most fun things we get to do in first, showing what we do to people and interacting with new people and kind of spreading the message. So those are kind of our most effective ways, I guess you could say, of appealing business to people.
I will just add on one more thing, though. Sometimes we find it effective to talk about maybe some of the business aspects that are a little bit more technical, because sometimes people might, when they're trying to see what part of the robotics team that they want to join, they'll see business and be like, that there's nothing robotics-y about it. It's just like business. It's just different things. But, you can do graphic design, you can do video, you can do website. There's still a lot of technical aspects about business that you can be a part of. So I think sometimes capitalizing on that can be helpful.
We have a question coming in from V. Joe. My school district recently allocated a lot of funding for robotics to middle school VEX and FLL teams. Should we implement a mentorship program to grow our future?
I think that's a great idea, implementing a mentorship program, which is something that we did a few years back, where majority of our team members were able to mentor younger teams in our area. And for those on our team who didn't have any prior, like First Lego League or First Tech Challenge experience, we were able to partner up with someone who did, and they were able to get the experience to go mentor out teams and really work with younger students. So if you have like the funding and if you have the time and the interest, definitely go with the mentor team. It's a great experience, and it's just in general really, rewarding thing. And eventually it will come back and help your team and benefit your team. Hopefully those kids who are interested in robotics eventually come and join your team.
Not much to add after that, but I think it's definitely worth it to create some sort of mentorship program, I mean, you'll feel the effects pretty immediately of that. It'll help you grow your own team, and as well as creating a sustainable program in FLL. I mean, why not?
Yeah, they said it all. I mean, you have the funding. Just put the time into it, and you'll reap some big rewards.
I have two questions coming in from Angel and John that kind of touch upon the same things. How are all the rookies trained during off-season and during season in order to get them ready for build and competitive season? How are they fit to be involved when competitive seasons arrive?
So,
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. During the off season, like I know for the mechanical team, we have projects that we have the rookies work on, and I know for business, we kind of go back through last year's stuff and we look over that to see what we have to prepare for, and we try to do as much prep work as possible. So kind of just like reviewing last year's stuff or doing new projects.
Like Luca mentioned earlier, we do have a set of summer training courses, like our Team 101, which is a required course, as well as our Safety 101 and Shop 101 that every team member has to complete. And so we start offering those in the summer. Once we get into the fall and a little bit closer to build season, we've really tried to form our training program with, such that we can immediately get students involved in like really the essence of what we do. So in software, just trying to not just learning how to code, but robot code. So that you can actually utilize it in the season. Strategy, creating some mock games and having people do some things with that. And then for business, we immediately try to get people knowledgeable about our team and first in what we do, and then we'll go through last year's submissions.
Yeah, just off-season projects are a really effective way to make sure that not just new members, but everyone is honing their skills and that they're going to be prepared for the build season. Specifically, we have something called mock kickoff, which is right before actual kickoff, where we'll go through our entire kickoff process from beginning to end using an older game. And that really prepares all of the new members who've never been through anything on kind of what to expect and what to look for.
You all kind of touched upon what you do to kind of train members, new members coming in for your season. How do you kind of keep that up during season? Like, how do you incorporate newer members who might not be as experienced into your competitive season build? And on top of that, do you actually continue teaching them during season, or is there kind of a cutoff that's the learning kind of stops and the doing starts?
I think something that we really like to do is making sure they're working in small groups with, rookies and more senior members. So even if they recently joined the team or they joined the team a little bit later, they're able to have that hands-on experience with the senior and kind of work one-on-one and kind of pick up things along the way. And I guess for people who do join in later, that's probably their best way to learn, even if they did miss out on previous training.
For us, I think there's no real cutoff between when the learning ends and the experience starts, because you're always learning from experience. Our training programs stop when the build season starts with kickoff, but we prioritize involving our rookie members in certain projects that happen during build season, where they're working with older members of the team, again, in smaller groups. I can say specifically for a business, we have no issue really involving new members into our various projects. There's a lot of time in the fall season to get them acquainted, and honestly, just being in the environment and hearing some of the words and terms and ideas, it's pretty easy. I wouldn't say easy, but you can pick it up pretty quick and start contributing quite a lot very rapidly once you join the team and are really committed to it.
Yeah. I guess you could say there's kind of a stop because everything gets really hectic in build season. I'm sure that's true for all teams. So we kind of stop having our training meetings, but you never stop learning. You just start kind of learning by doing, whether that's by someone who's more experienced putting together a gearbox and you're watching and helping them. You're always kind of learning even as you're working on it, because as you gain that experience as you're a newer member, that means that as you go on, you'll know how to do it the next year. And then maybe the year after that, you're experienced enough to show someone who's now a new member on the team how to do it. So the learning never stops in a sense.
How do you ensure that your team is sustainable in terms of maintaining your knowledge throughout different seasons? And how do you kind of make sure that not only like the knowledge is there, but also like the leadership and the transfer of kind of power is done like smoothly without any hiccups?
So for us, talking about leadership specifically, each leader usually has like a deputy that kind of does the job with them. And the deputy is usually a lower classman, so that when the leader leaves, we'll have the deputy to step up and take their place. And then for the rest of the team, I guess it would be like through documentation. So like we just kind of know everything down so that we can look back on previous years and know like what worked and what didn't, so that we can use that for the upcoming season.
And then for robots specifically, we do like build reports every week and making sure we're always communicating with the mentors and make sure we have meeting minutes, all that normal stuff.
We have worked really hard to solidify our leadership structure. So we don't have a president, but we have four department heads this year. Which is build, strategy, software, and business. And so, and then we'll have some leaders below that. But after every season, we'll go through like reflection. Maybe we'll have a meeting or two just about what went well, what didn't go well, and then to make improvements for the next season. And then before the summer season, right before the summer season in like May or June, our head mentor will finalize the leadership committee for the upcoming season. And so that no one, like after that's decided, no one can touch that, and no one can touch that. We just go along with it. And then in terms of knowledge, it's kind of just an unspoken rule on our team to always be involving younger members, rookie members, so that the knowledge doesn't go to waste. It doesn't leave after a member graduates. And so we really tried to emphasize that in our training programs.
Yeah, the one-on-one experience of kind of passing on the knowledge, in my experience, is most effective. It happened to me when I was a freshman and I just joined the team. And he kind of put me through everything that I needed to know to start like doing my own things in the business team on Team 3309. He kind of set me up to learn and kind of grow into like leadership skills and the business skills that I was going to need to work on the team and contribute. However, for the passing on of leadership, I think it's really just whoever has the drive and whoever's committed, because they're going to be the ones who will put the team above themselves. And those sorts of people sometimes will want to take on leadership, sometimes won't. And you kind of have to encourage them by putting them into leadership positions, even if it's not necessarily a VP or a head of something, but putting them in charge of a group, and you're just working on a task. Doing these sorts of things can help encourage kind of leadership in some of your members. as well as further down the line, help preserve leadership as far as like the continuation of the team. And then for kind of the transferring of knowledge, our alumni are really involved, and I think that's because we always reach out to them when we need help. So by doing that, the knowledge never kind of leaves. It always just keeps being passed down, and I think that's one of the best things about Team 3309 is how we keep the alumni really involved.
One final question before we end things off here. We kind of mentioned this throughout the whole panel, but how does your team like itself approach leadership, and what's like the leadership structure of your team, and how does that impact your season and like kind of like the development of your team as a whole?
So, like I said a little bit earlier, I think was it last year? It was probably last year. We reformatted our leadership, and we have our president who's mainly communicating with mentors, like have direct communication with coaches. And below the president, we have our VP of business, VP of PR, and then VP of robot. And then those VPs, they work directly with their sub team, chairman's lead, people who manage electrical programming, all that type of stuff. And we really emphasize on chain of command. If something goes wrong in robot, you talk to the VP of robot, you don't go straight to president. So that was probably the biggest things we stressed out this last year. And so far it's been working really well. Problems that show up, we're able to effectively take care of them and stuff like that.
Our team has a bit of a different model. We don't have one person who's at the top like a president. We have our now 4 department heads. So build, design, software, strategy, and business and outreach. And then below each one of those, we have a couple of sub-department heads. So our director of design and our drive team director. And then below that, we have some additional directors, project sub-leads as well. I guess chain of command isn't as prevalent when you have more of a spread out leadership structure, but it is still important that we hold those responsible ultimately all the way up to the department heads for the actions of the department. So a bit of a different model, but I think it's something that works really well. And the department heads tend to work together quite a lot, kind of creating more of a committee role as opposed to one person in charge of the whole program.
So with our team, we're not as big, so we're a little bit more concentrated. We have our president, and then we have our 6 vice presidents. So that's business, marketing, operations, mechanical, programming, and we have one more that I can't remember off the top of my head. But we don't really have heads under them. We have those 6, and they all work with the president and the mentors. So it's kind of just like a tight group. So for business, it's just kind of the like 4 or 5 of us working together, and then we'll work together with the 4 or 5 in marketing, because we work really close together on the supplementals for chairmans and how we want to market our team and the message we want to craft and deliver. So as far as how our leadership program is structured, that's how we do it.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you for the panelists. We'll have to wrap up today's first workshop. Special thanks to Team 3309, Team 1622, and Team 2485. The summer series will continue in 5 minutes, where Team 5199 will host a workshop on creating an effective robotics curriculum. Highly recommended you tune in, especially if you're considering creating your own curriculum for your team. Otherwise, thank you for tuning into the summer series this past week and hope you enjoyed. This has been Ali Aruji from Team 5199. Thank you to our panelists and thank you for tuning in.
Okay, we're live. Welcome everybody to the last workshop of the 2020 summer series. It's creating a curriculum for robotics. I'm Kyle Valone from Team 5199, and I am on our student board with my other presenter, Caden Davis.
Hi everyone. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're both experienced with creating curriculum for our team, and I've also worked on creating curriculum for biology and just in general STEAM workshops for 2 nonprofits. I'll let Caden introduce himself now.
Hi everyone, I'm Caden Davis. Though I don't have the same level of curriculum experience as Kyle, I have a lot of experience with effectively teaching students, from leading a chemistry study group and working as a tutor.
Okay, so let's just start with the basics. What is a curriculum? And there's really 2 definitions. One of them is just all the experiences that a student has in the educational process. And for that, you just need to make sure to make it engaging and varied to promote memory and support all types of learners. So we want to support visual, auditory, by having a variety of instructional aids so that they can absorb that information in a way that works for them. So really catering to everyone to make sure that memory of what you're teaching is promoted. And then you also have, for more the teacher side, a planned series of educational experiences meant to teach a specific topic. So here we have lectures, videos, demonstrations, hands-on opportunities, assignments, tests, and guided practice. So those are just some of the examples of those educational experiences that can be used to create a curriculum from the educator's end.
So when you start planning a curriculum, one of the main things you want to start with is your goal. When you consider the overall timeline, you want to look at the amount of time you have allotted and figure out what skills students should have by the end of it. For a robotics season, you naturally want students to be as well prepared as possible for the upcoming robotics season. So you have to choose the skills that will best benefit your students' learning and their ability to contribute. This we can't provide like a preset for, because this is largely based on your team and your team's kind of values. As you see there, it's kind of your team's decision whether a sheet metal brake user or a 3D printer user would be better for the team. So there are a couple different types of learning that a curriculum can have. Guided learning is basically what you'd expect of a classroom environment. It's a typical lesson plan with a lecture or a supervised lesson. In this, the instructor and the students work hand in hand. Then the next kind is student-based learning. This can be 2 types, either group projects or like an independent research report or a research project. This is a lot of like homework almost. So those are kind of the 2 main types. Now, if Kyle wants to move on.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple to guided learning and student-based learning, and then we'll talk about independent learning. So an important tenet of guided learning is that students can check their work and ask questions because they have the full support of their instructor. It's where you're going to be doing most of the conceptual learning. You'll be getting that from guided learning, and then you'll be able to apply it to the other 2 groups, where student-based learning and independent learning. Of course, in student-based learning, it can also be very similar to independent learning, in which the student would be applying the concepts to learn further about their further in their studies. And then the individual learning can test those student abilities and allows them to demonstrate their skills in addition to having them apply them. And an example of that might be a group assessment, where you can take it with a group to be able to fill in those knowledge gaps that might be present. You'll be able to figure out where they are while you're working with a group in a low stakes environment. But it could also be a group project where everyone's doing their own sort of thing, but they're all learning from, for instance, each other's designs or each other's presentations. So now independent learning, you're giving the students all of the resources needed to learn on their own time. So it could be a video series, it could be an independent work packet. There's a variety of things you can give to them to have them be able to learn whatever your desired outcomes are on their time. Now, it's still helpful to provide an instructor for support, because students might hit a wall and they might require some additional help. They might not be able to overcome this obstacle, or there might be a learning gap that they're just not getting that they need some instructor help on. So that could just be like they can't figure out where something is in a specific program they need to use, and the instructor needs to say, oh, it's just this tab in this program. Or it could be as advanced as them not getting it on a conceptual level where they might need one-on-one time with an instructor to hammer that out and be able to progress in their independent studies. I'd say this approach is best for CAD and programming because they require a lot of experience in independent troubleshooting in a virtual environment. A lot of CAD and programming just tend to be being able to fix your mistakes or be able to approach it from really a creative lens to be able to have your final outcome meet what your expectations are, if that makes sense. So really that is a lot of independent work. And while you might still have a programming group or a CAD group, a lot of it relies on the individual's skill in that area, their ability to have all the knowledge to be able to complete their job effectively. Next slide.
And one final note is that well-guided learning is very effective at teaching. Student-based learning and independent learning are much better examples for the students of how the actual season will be run. Because during the season, they aren't going to be sitting through a lecture, they're going to be trying to complete some task.
Yeah, and so now we're going to compare the two types of curricula, if you will. So for the common curricula, it teaches all students the same information and knowledge. This is just a standard set of curriculum that every student is going to receive. And these curriculum can be made out of those other prior types of curricula experiences, that student-based guided learning and independent. All of that can be incorporated into a common curricula, but it's the same curriculum delivered to all students. And this means that all students will come out with a baseline level of knowledge in all of those fields. And this is good for some students. Some students like this approach. They like being a jack of all trades and they want to be a generalist throughout the season. They want to do a little bit of electronics, a little bit of programming, a little bit of CAD, and a little bit of manufacturing. So really it is a approach that honestly should be a standard to start with training students. It's that basic level of training that allows students to do low-level skills that are still necessary for the robot, but they might want to be more advanced, which is where the sub-team specific curriculum comes in. I'll let Caden talk more in depth about that.
Yeah, sub-team specific curricula you'll likely see as you progress further along in students' learning, because it lets students specialize with in-depth knowledge. It really lets students get the breadth and the depth of technical expertise if they ever want to lead the sub-team for themselves. The benefit is that students become, they are able to excel in a couple fields and become very proficient in those, but they might not be as skilled or as well-versed in other fields. Another flaw is that if you immediately approach students with a sub-team specific curricula, students likely won't know exactly what they want to specialize in. So here we get a bit more into the issues with different types of curricula. So if you have a common curriculum, the main flaw of this is that you'll have a lot of students who can do all the basic tasks, like every student knows how to solder, every student knows how to make a gearbox, but you'll find that they lack some of the higher level technical or just other skills needed for that field. While they do know how to make a gearbox, they don't know how to find the ratio of gears that they need to accomplish some task. A sub-team specific curriculum, on the other hand, can lead to gaps in students' knowledge just because they become focused on one field without considering that the robot is all of those fields combined. And I really like this example. If you have a person who is amazing at CAD, but they don't understand a lot of the key concepts used by the mechanical sub-team, or just not know all of the different parts available to the mechanical sub-team, then their mechanisms will likely be of a lower quality than someone who does understand all of that. And one of the main ways to mitigate both issues is to kind of combine the two types. So we partially brought this up before when we said how at the start of the season, we have a common curriculum. And as students learn more and figure out where they want to go or what they like best, you can start having them get more specialized. And that helps produce students that are both pretty well-rounded, but also are able to do higher level work in certain fields.
Yeah, and that's exceptionally important just to make sure that you have a well-rounded team in all areas, but you also have the members that need to do all your specific tasks. So making sure that you have students be able to separate into those sub-teams, but still understand what's going on everywhere else in the robotic system, that's extremely important to make sure you have a strong and functioning team. And so obviously we've sort of touched on them, but you need to think about the connections students should be making. Between those different sections in a common curriculum, you need to have the student making the connection between, for instance, CAD and manufacturing. If they don't identify that a mechanism has to be serviceable, then you're going to have a lot of issues during season when you're trying to do a quick bolt change or you have to switch out a part. If they aren't designed to have manufacturing in mind and having the robot operate in a high-stress, high-risk environment, then you're going to have a hard time being able to quickly maintenance in the pits. So it's very important that all of the students understand what connections they should make to other sub-teams. And while you as the instructor might be able to extrapolate a concept, the beginning students need help structuring what to connect to at first. And so that example that I just talked about with CAD needing to know mechanical so they know where parts can go, and that even extrapolates to electrical as well. CAD would need to know that, hey, there are wires connected to the motor, even if that doesn't show it in their CAD design, and they have to have space for that. That's extremely important. And so you have to touch upon the interdisciplinary connections. And that's extremely, extremely important for robotics. I can't stress that enough. And we'll show another example on the next slide. So here's just an example of interdisciplinary connections. If you're tying digital drawings in a CAD program to practical applications with a manual mill, you have to be able to show what consideration you have to have while making the drawing in CAD. And if you can see in the picture, the bottom one, there's a zeroed point at the top left corner of that part. And it doesn't exactly matter what that part is, it's just an example, of course. But zeroing the part properly in the drawing will help your machinists be more effective and efficient because they'll be able to not have to recalculate everything if you zeroed it, for instance, in the middle of the part for some reason. You'll be able to have everything set up in a standard process to allow your team to be efficient. But how do you have students understand this and recognize it? It's simply by just telling them that we do this end for a specific means. It's not a random technicality. It's done to promote an effect. So in this case, zeroing the part properly in the drawing will help your machining team be more efficient. Providing that reason reinforces memory. So explaining why your team does those specific things is extremely important to make sure students understand why they're doing it. They're not just sticking it to the man, they're helping their team run better, if that makes sense.
So when you make a curriculum, another consideration is that new students will have different levels of knowledge. You could have a student come in who's very interested in robotics, but doesn't really know even how to use a drill. But you could have another student come in who has been programming with FLL for 3 years, already has learned a fair amount of Java. You need to be able to keep the advanced students interested without overwhelming inexperienced students. However, even with those advanced students, oftentimes, especially if they're self-taught, they might have some kind of gap in their knowledge somewhere. So it can be critical for later success that all the students are kind of have that foundation of knowledge reinforced. So let's say a student, they think they know a lot about building, and they do, but they don't know about shaft collars, so they might not know how to approach that situation. And that's something that could be quickly covered just by a brief kind of primer to get students caught up.
So now we're getting to the extremely important part, and that's documentation. Before I go ahead on this slide, I do want to mention that if anyone in the chat has any questions for us to answer, we're going to hold them to the end, but please do ask us questions. We'd love to answer them and help your team be prepared to lead an effective curriculum starting as soon as possible. So with documentation, it's extremely important to document curricula, especially for training purposes. And keeping that curricula roughly the same year to year helps with team succession. It creates a consistent standard for trainees after completion of a specific curriculum. You'll know that every cadre will be able to do a drive base, for instance, if they go through a specific set of curriculum. And you won't have any doubts about what each student will be able to do after they've gone through that common curriculum or that sub-team specific curriculum. And in addition to just documenting the raw resources you're using, you should document the curriculum completion schedule, so how long a student should spend on every specific thing, roughly. You should document the lesson plans, which we'll talk more about in the next slide. You should document your objectives and your resources used in the curriculum as well. And continual revisions of your documented curriculum makes it more understandable and engaging. You should always ask your students what worked, what didn't work with your curriculum. If there's a part that you noticed students were struggling on during that curriculum, revise it, make it easier to understand, make it easier to read. Always visual aids definitely help a whole lot with making sure students can make that connection. Having just words is not always enough. You definitely want pictures as references, as explanations. It's extremely important to include those to make sure that's all set up. And also, because you are the instructor, you're in that higher position of authority, the documentation that you give to students, those assignments, those independent work packets, etc., those must be held to a higher standard of language and grammar. Otherwise, it's going to appear half-baked. So you really want to make sure you have all the words spelled correctly, capitalize the beginnings of your sentences, make sure you have periods where you should have periods. Just basic English standards. Just make sure they're all perfectly done for your curriculum, so it gives your curriculum that ethos, that you know what you're doing. So we have a couple slides on lesson plans. We'll show the example next slide, but I'll go over what is going to be in them in the next, or in this slide. So the building block of any curriculum really is the lesson plan, because that lays out what you're going to do as the instructor that day. And you can it's perfectly fine if you want to publicize your lesson plans to the students. It's not a required thing, but if you want to give them a calendar of what they're learning and what they should take away from those lessons, that's very important. I know a lot of schools have started having teachers put, like, students will be able to on their board and have a targeted objective for every day. And a lot of teachers, at least where I am, they don't fill that out. But having the students know what they need to learn puts the responsibility on the student to be able to make sure that they have all the information they need. And communicating that as the instructor to the student is extremely important to make sure those takeaways are met, those desired outcomes are achieved. And so the lesson plan for the instructor is beneficial for ensuring that each class day or instructional time achieves its primary goal, and it helps prevent class days from feeling wasted or unproductive. Making sure you have those goals, those target objectives for every day, and you have a well-defined plan before you start teaching, that's extremely important to make sure you have a well-run classroom. As much as I like to wing it occasionally, you need to have a plan before you walk into the classroom that day, or start your meeting with students. It's really important for training. It's really important for just general meetings, even beyond just teaching. So being prepared, having an agenda, having that lesson plan, that's super important. And so setting up a schedule of lesson plans before beginning to teach a curriculum is imperative. You want to have that calendar diagrammed out before you start teaching. You have your objectives, you have all your meeting time set up. That's important. So the components of the lesson plan, that's the last part of this slide. You'll definitely want to have your date when you're going to be teaching it, whether it's an exact date like December 12th, or if it's just, well, this is day one of the curriculum, this is what we'll be doing that day. Either is fine, just having a defined way to know when you're teaching and when it will be finished teaching. And then you should have the lesson title, just so you know what you're pulling out of the file cabinet when you start. And so students know what they're learning as well. It should be a short title most of the time, just to make sure that you have that as a target. And the lesson title can kind of play into the target objective as well. The lesson title should communicate what your target objective is, what you're going to be learning about. And that target objective should set out the skills that students are expected to learn by the end of the lesson. And it should be tied in, obviously, to the lesson title to make sure that you are consistent between the two. But the target objective should be that more specific extrapolation of the lesson title, what's going to be learned, what is expected of the students. And then you definitely want to document what your required materials and resources are. Just so if students are learning at home, if it's an independent thing, they'll have those all prepared. If you're teaching it and distributing the resources so that you have all of those resources prepared before the meeting starts, you're not going to spend time looking for them or anything like that. And then lastly, the itinerary and the schedule, that's the most important part of the lesson plan. It's going to diagram what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and what resources you're going to use to make that happen. So Caden's going to walk us through an example of an electrical lesson plan on the next slide to see that in motion.
So here's a kind of example lesson plan. As you can see, as Kyle mentioned, our title is Wiring Basics, but the target objective gets a lot more specific into that. Another thing to note is that if any of you have done bio or chem, this probably reminds you a lot of a pre-lab, and it kind of serves the same role, where it's just a walkthrough of all the things you need to ensure that they run smoothly. So here are the instructors, Professor Elemental and Dozer. This is another thing that we kind of touched on before, but you want to make sure that you communicate with everyone, especially if there's multiple people involved. Who is doing what? Like, who is responsible for each section of the lesson plan? So in a robotics curriculum, one of the final things to talk about is assessments. These in school are all your tests, reports, and homework. In a robotics curriculum, they can be a bit different. They still serve the same necessary goal, where you get to check students' progress and their understanding. In a hands-on robotics curriculum, like they typically are, aside from maybe this year, assessments can be both explicit or implicit. So an explicit assessment is you sit students down, have them fill out a test, or have them, I don't know, make something for you.
Like a performance task.
Yeah, really this is just directly testing their performance and understanding. Implicit assessments are very common. You can pretty much view every day of the build season as an implicit assessment, or really just any time during the season, to see who needs support or what concepts need to be covered again. Even if you aren't being graded on them, you can still gain insight about your curriculum, about your students, and about how the overall team is learning from an implicit assessment.
Yeah, and it's especially important to have implicit assessments or formative assessments. And formative assessments would be explicit assessments that are not used as a grade or anything to like level the student. It's important to have those to assess where the weak spots are in your curriculum or where the weak spots are in your teaching. That's extremely important to assess, especially in every robotics season. So if you're teaching and you're noticing that students might have had that knowledge for any test or assessment that you've given, those explicit ones, but they aren't able to do it in build season, those implicit assessments allow you to show where those weak spots are and to address those weak spots in either a remedial session or future courses as well. So it's extremely important to do all of those. And I think that was all for the presentation. Right? Yeah, the final slide. So we don't have any questions right now, but if you do have questions, please let us know. I guess we'll just review the takeaways while we're waiting for any in chat. And if there aren't any, we'll end in a couple minutes.
Yeah, so if I could... Oh, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll start real quick. So really the big takeaway is you want to, or the best practices for structuring your curriculum is to have that common curriculum at the very beginning of your off season or whenever you're starting training. And especially with new members, that's very important to have everyone be on a common ground by the end of their original training. And then you can go into that sub-team specific curriculum and have all of these students be able to specialize in whatever groups they choose. They can do one or more, or they can just stay a generalist throughout and develop their skills in every single exact thing. And then another one is when you're making that curriculum, make sure that you're doing a mix of the guided practice or the guided learning, the student-based learning, and the independent learning. It's important to have a mix, as well as a mix of auditory, visual, all of those types of aids. Caden, do you have anything to add on that? Because we did just get a question.
Yeah, so really quickly on the sub-team specific curriculum, one more kind of flaw that I would like to bring up is that it requires a lot more coordination to ensure that everyone is learning, everyone is keeping up to pace, no one is falling behind. Just because instead of managing one big group, you're trying to manage 6 smaller groups, each with a different lead that you need to communicate with. All right, if you would like to share the question.
Yeah, so we do have 2 questions right now, and keep them coming. We'd be happy to answer them. This is our last workshop, so there's nowhere that any of us are going in the near future. But Tara asks, would you be willing to share your documented curriculum to help our team create its own curriculum? So actually right now we're in the process of creating a lot of our curriculum. This is one of the reasons that we created this this presentation, because we are in the middle, in the thick of it, of creating our common curriculum and our specific curriculums, because our robotics team has been transitioning to a class over the past couple of years, and we are working on setting up a final curriculum guide to make sure we're meeting all those content standards for the year ahead, especially as we have to reach requirements for our districts and whatnot to make sure that we can have the class in order to have that curriculum. Really, the one that we have almost completely done right now is the CAD curriculum. I was the lead designer on that one, and over the past year, I've led it 3 times, and we've been revising it. That will be out on our website, which is also under development right now. That will be out later this summer. When it is, we'll post a link in the description of the recording, and we'll be happy to share that. As we develop more curriculum, we are going to look at making it public, but of course there are definitely a lot of teams that already have resources out there that teams can use. And it's perfectly fine to use other teams' curriculum in order to develop your own. You can choose to either use theirs directly or pull things from it. For instance, for CAD, I learned CAD through Symbotics tutorials, and they're a great resource, but we also wanted to do a more directed one for our team. So we made an independent work packet for students to work through at their own pace, and in the intention that it would be in a room with an instructor to be able to facilitate that, especially because SolidWorks is a very difficult program to just learn on your own in a room with instructions. But yeah, definitely look at what other teams have to offer, and as I said, we'll be publishing what we have of our SolidWorks training curriculum very soon to see what an independent work packet would look like. And that can definitely be adapted for just regular guided instruction as well, and student-based learning. I hope that answers your question. Sorry we don't have more to publish, but that's definitely a key thing to be aware of. Just look at what resources there are available and pull from those, but also develop yours if you feel there's gaps. And then we also have a question from John. He says, do you have any insights into ways to make ways to make a virtual workshop really successful, and then in parentheses, other than the ones you just demonstrated? Well, I'm personally flattered. Thank you very much. And we've been working very hard to make sure our workshops were held to a consistent level of standard in terms of quality and also branding. I guess the key thing is you follow what we outlined in the important rules of those curriculum creation to make sure you have a engaging and effective workshop. You have to vary all of your aids. And in this one, we did it a lot more of with infographics and that type of style. So we switched between graphics and text in graphics to make it more appealing and engaging. But we also made sure to add anecdotes and whatnot. And although this one we didn't have any videos to show because it was more of an online format, Videos are also definitely very effective just to make sure it's not you speaking too long. And I've obviously spoken a long time, so I'll let Caden chime in as well.
So something I've noticed with all of these online workshops or other virtual things is, as kind of this one is, a lot of them are the guided learning type of learning, where all the students are just kind of sitting there learning from you. They aren't actually doing all that much themselves. So I feel like a very good way to get students more engaged is to lean a bit more into that student-based learning or independent learning. And we did that on our team by doing kind of quarantine projects where they had to choose some aspect of COVID life and try and come up with a solution or some kind of invention to help make that easier. And I found that a good way to engage our students.
Yeah, and definitely it's a lot harder to engage students, especially if it's virtual workshops like these where it's multiple teams coming from any backgrounds, right? So that's one of the reasons actually that we don't have any specific CAD workshops this time, because teams use so many different things and we want to be able to teach it rather than just give a lecture on it. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different approaches you can take to that. And also for student involvement just in general, you can also engage students in creating your curriculum. That's a huge way of getting students involved, especially if we have to transition everything virtually depending on where you are, like we have to do. Making sure the students who have learned are involved in making that curriculum and saying, well, this worked for me and this didn't work for me and whatnot, that's extremely important. And you can also engage students in creating resources for your teams beyond just like instructional curriculum. For instance, we're going to try to engage our students later this summer in creating a mechanism compendium that details all the important design considerations and philosophies for specific FRC mechanisms, even if we may have not had a specific practice with it directly before. So like our team hasn't done a pulley climber at all like some of the telescoping ones this year are. So we're trying to build that knowledge base and have all the resources there for our team, but also have students make it so that they're experienced with those mechanisms. So that's a fun project for some teams if you have the time and resources. It looks like we have another question from Ali. It says, has COVID changed the approach you're taking on creating the curriculum? Caden, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I feel like the main thing it's made us reconsider is that we want to focus a lot more on CAD and programming because they are the easiest to do with the current half school, half online system. One consideration with that though is, at least for our area, we don't know yet whether robotics will be following that half school, half online. So if we are entirely online, we know that we're going to be relying a lot more on CAD and programming knowledge, like teaching our students.
And we'll also be definitely relying on good design practices as well, good engineering practices, all of the things that you could really teach in a lecture style. And unfortunately, we don't love the lecture style because it can be dry and not engaging at sometimes. Hopefully, this one was entertaining to all of you watching. But we are going to lean into that lecture format a little more this year but we're also going to try to create other aids that can be used in teaching. For instance, one of the things we're probably going to run through with most of our team members, especially the new ones, is I think his name is Brian Gray. He has Roboting. It's a white paper on Chief Delphi, and that's a really great guide for new students. Just a lot of things that you'll see in FRC, a lot of common applications, materials, mechanisms. It's a really helpful intro to FRC guide that we're probably going to have a lot of our students read. And we also like to have our students read the New Cool by Neil Bascom. It's a book detailing the D Penguineers, one of their successful seasons. I believe it was Lunacy. And that helps our team bring our students into a better relationship with how the season will actually work, so they'll know what they're expected to commit to our team. by reading the experience of that other team, 1717. So that's where we're going to go with most of our first semester for training. Hopefully, we'll be able to instruct virtually some aspects of just mechanical and electronics, which are the things that are probably going to be suffering from the most with lack of hands-on experience. But we're hoping to be able to either maybe give our students like a care package with all the stuff they'll need to learn, so like a shaft collar and part of a hex shaft, if that makes sense, and have them be able to get some hands-on experience from home in a safe environment. But we're going to see how the situation evolves and what our school district ends up doing with our robotics class in the future. So it's all in flux, but we are going to try to take that virtual environment and make it work for robotics. And then Tara asked if we could repeat the names of the document again. And that was Roboting by Brian Gray. It's pretty easy to find on Chief Delphi. And when we upload the individual archive of the stream, not the just live playback of the streams, but when we actually separate them into workshops and post them on our channel, we will try to remember to put that in our live stream description. And I think that was the last question, and we're just about at time. So I guess it's almost time to say goodbye for our first inaugural summer series. We were really happy to be able to present this experience to teams, and we hope teams were able to grow from it and learn from it, and individuals as well, of course. So we hope you've had a great time with us over this week. I've been behind the stream most of the days, so it's been a long experience for me as well. So thank you guys for coming out and watching our stream and supporting our stream. We're really happy we were able to bring this educational opportunity, and we really hope that we've helped teams grow from it, and we'll hopefully look forward to seeing you guys next year. So thank you very much for coming to the summer series and watching us over these 5 days. I guess Caden and I will say goodbye for now, and we'll sign off.
Yeah. Thank you. See ya.
Okay. See you guys.
Yeah. Hope your teams do well. Good luck.
Good luck.